On behalf of The Ohio State University and its College of Engineering, I would like to welcome you to Women Who Lead. I am Lisa Burgroff-McCauley, and it is my distinct pleasure to be here today with President Kristina Johnson and Dean Ayanna Howard, who will have a discussion with these two women who lead exceptionally well, I might add, in celebration of this International Women in Engineering Day. I am an aerospace engineer and a proud alum of Ohio State's College of Engineering. I can honestly say that I have gone places due to my engineering education at Ohio State that I never would have dreamed of as a freshman when I started here many years ago. I graduated from the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering department, which is the same department that graduated Ohio State's first woman engineer, Bertha LeMay, in 1893.
Wow.
International Women in Engineering Day was established to celebrate the achievements and the work of women engineers everywhere, so women like Bertha and myself. And we are here today with a great opportunity to learn from two wonderfully accomplished women who are not only engineers and leaders, but entrepreneurs and educators. I cannot think of two better role models for women who are considering or who are working in engineering as a career. Today, we will begin with a discussion between Dean Howard and President Johnson, who will share their insights that they've gained through their unique personal experiences. We'll save time for some audience questions, and since there's a lot to cover in just a short period of time, I'll begin by introducing Dean Howard, who will then introduce President Johnson. Dean Ayanna Howard is an internationally renowned roboticist. She earned her engineering degrees from Brown University and the University of Southern California. She began her career at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where she developed robotics and AI technology for planetary missions. She then joined the faculty at Georgia Tech, where she founded the Human Automation Systems Laboratory, and later was named chair of the Interactive Computing School, while retaining a joint fellowship with the School of Engineering, Electrical and Computer Engineering. She also is the author of Race and Robotics, How to Be Human in the Age of AI, and is the president of the board of directors of Xi Robotics, a company that she founded that develops technology products for children with special needs. She's received numerous honors and recognition, including being named one of the 23 most powerful women engineers in the world by Business Insider, and one of the top 50 US women in tech by Forbes. We were fortunate to have enticed her to come to Ohio State as our first woman Dean of Engineering. Dean Howard's accomplishments are overshadowed only by her passion for engineering, robotics in particular, but also her passion for educating the future generation of engineers. With that, Dean Howard.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is we're going to probe a couple of questions for our lovely President Kristina Johnson. And through those questions, she will tell her story. I am a storyteller, and so I think this is a great format to do this. So my first question, I've long known you to be an engineer, and just recently as president. And so I want to know is what really sparked your interest in engineering? So this is the million-dollar question, so that people that are out there like, I don't even know what an engineer is. How does she even get into that?
Oh, great question. First of all, thanks. It's lovely to be here with both of you and accomplished engineers. You know, I think that the joy of engineering is taking a really big problem and cutting it down into small pieces, optimizing those pieces, and then optimizing the whole. In fact, Bill Wolf, who you know is the former president of the National Academy of Engineering, said that engineering is design under constraint. And we all live our lives under constraint. So why not figure out how to do it artfully? That's what engineering is to me.
Beautiful. And so if you think about engineering and all the things that you've done, can you explain it in terms of publics, like the theme that drove you with respect to either the company or your deanship or any of those things that really excited and sparked your interest?
So I thought engineering was magic. Honestly, it's just magic. And you deal with robots. I mean, that's magical. And I think I was in high school my senior year, and I did a science fair project in holography. This was a long time ago, before holograms were on stamps on envelopes, so it was cutting edge at the time. And to see something floating in space that you had created, like as an illusory image, to me was just magic. And that's really sparked my career.
So thinking about this career, A lot of times, people, when they think of engineers, they don't think of you, right? They think of
Right.
someone, maybe pocket protector, glasses, although I think most of us do wear glasses, you know. And so if you think about engineering and you think about the skills that you've gained,
Right.
why were those really essential to becoming a leader?
Right. So again, I think it's thinking about to lead a complex institution, whether it's the College of Engineering, which is one of the largest colleges of engineering in the country with what, 10,000 students? That's larger than most universities. Or leading the Ohio State University, which is the third largest actually the third largest university in the country. It's a complex organization. And that's what engineering teaches you how to do, is to deal with complexity. Think about things from a systems perspective. So I'm an electrical engineer, like my father. And actually my grandfather was a mechanical engineer with an electrical engineering focus from the Ohio State University. Back in about the time that Berta Lamé graduated. In fact, I digress for a moment, Benjamin Lamé, her brother, was the first Sullivan Award winner, a graduate from the Ohio State College of Engineering, and both my grandfather and Benjamin Lamé worked together at Westinghouse. So, but back to focus. I think it's just dealing with that kind of complexity. As an electrical engineer, I learned engineering from a systems perspective. So there's physics-based approach to electrical engineering, and there's systems-based, and I came from more of the systems-based, although I had a lot of background in physics. So I think it's really that systems perspective. Again, I thought it was magical. You know, if you have an output and you know the transfer function of the system and you have an input, you can predict the output, or vice versa. That's magic for a linear system, of course.
So I'm just going to diverge. Do you think people or societies are constructed as linear systems where you have inputs, people, and outputs, rules and regulations?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. No, I don't think they're very linear at all, but that's why one of the hottest fields right now, which actually I started working in when I was at Stanford as an undergraduate, is adaptive signal processing, machine learning, AI, right? So that's exactly dealing with systems that aren't linear. Like if it's in a linear system, you can precisely define what's going to happen to a particular input because you know the impulse response to the transfer function of that black box, for example. But people aren't linear and they are complex. And so that's why we've developed tools to deal with those complexity. Again, the reason to be an engineer.
And the reason to study artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I just had to put that in.
Yeah.
So kind of going on this aspect of being an engineer, being a leader, you are also identify as a woman.
Yes.
So if I think about your paths, you've been the first in many, many, many cases.
Right.
How do you, if you think about your experience, what were the positives of being a woman in the field and maybe some of the challenges or barriers that you would, maybe like to fix?
Right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. Up until my last job, I was the first woman in every field, right? So, first in my department to be on the tenure track as a woman, first to be dean, first to be provost, and then undersecretary of energy. So it really was really nice not to have the headline be the first woman, right? So that was great. But I think that, being different, there is a certain, I think, responsibility to succeed that I'm sure we all feel as women in engineering. I mean, we're all been leaders and the first in many things, and I think you do feel that added pressure to succeed because you don't want to, let down the women.
So given that, there's still a lot of women out there that are being first. I mean, even students, and you think we're in 2021, 2022, and some of our students are still the first. And so if you think about the future of women in engineering, is there some nuggets that you can provide them?
You mean about being first?
About being the first, about the future of why we should stay in engineering and kind of those things.
Well, in terms of the why, which I think is key, to stay in engineering, again, I think everybody wants to make a positive change in the world. And the problems we have are so complex that I do believe it'll take a systems approach. So I think getting a great grounding in the systems perspective of complex problems and formulating a solution based on cross-disciplinary approaches is really the way to go. And so therefore I think it's just a great training, no matter what you do in the future. I mean, most people don't know that a third of the students that go on to business school, a third of the students go on to law school are engineers. And probably a third that go on to medical school, although I don't know that as a fact, a high percentage. And so again, it's just a great training for whatever you do.
No, I actually think that most people don't know that
Yeah.
as an engineer, you make a great medical doctor, a great lawyer, a great chemist,
Yes, that's
just because of the way we think.
Right, exactly.
So-
And the training that we get. And then the ability, I think as a president, one of my main goals is I want to give all our students the opportunity to get experiences outside the classroom. You know, the internships, the co-ops, the special projects that go beyond the capstone design, and really integrating that. And I know that's what we do at The Ohio State University. We've got I think more than 2,000 of our students a year do research in labs that are right here at The Ohio State University. So we're very good at getting our students these experiences, and will be great.
So speaking of goals, I'd like to segue into asking, because I'm sure our audience wants to know, what are your goals and priorities for Ohio State?
Well, it is still early days. However, I did give my first State of the University address, about 2-3 months ago. And I wanted to lay out a 10-year vision. And so the goals really center around the 4 excellences, right? Excellence in academics, excellence in research and innovation, excellence in entrepreneurship, and excellence in public service. And all those combined, in my view, add up to The Ohio State University being the absolute model of a land-grant university in the 21st century.
Okay, so there's 2 things I want to pick on, public service and entrepreneurship. So let me do public service first, because you know, as an engineer, I'm going to point it back to engineering.
Right,
so,
excellent.
So if you think about public service and you think about things like public policy and these aspects, what role do you think engineers have a responsibility in playing in this field?
I am so glad you asked that question. And because when I was Undersecretary of Energy, we did policy, but it was interesting is that I felt the need and the opportunity for the policymakers to be working hand in glove with engineers. Let me give you an example. Recently, I asked myself a question, I often do this, I said, if you had an acre of land and you wanted to pull down or prevent carbon from going into the atmosphere, would you plant that acre with trees or would you plant it with solar panels? I will leave that as an assignment to the audience. However, my calculation, back the envelope, and it's all about assumptions, would be solar is maybe 50 times more efficient. I would not have guessed that. And the metric would be dollars per ton, acre, and also because it's a matter of the cost, it's a matter of how many tons of CO2 you either prevent from going into the atmosphere or you draw down, and it's how much land does it take to do that. That's why I think engineers have such a great role to play as policymakers. And I'll give you another one. When I was Undersecretary again, this is when I thought most about this. We had a program called Cash for Clunkers.
Okay.
You may remember, you turn in a car, and if you can trade it for a car that would get you 30% more mileage efficiency. So Cash for Clunkers, spent $5 billion on it. We had another program called it was part of the tax code, the 1603, section 1603 of the tax code, which would give you 30% cash back tax-free grant for building certain types of renewables.
Okay.
So I asked myself again a question, which is more efficient? Cash for clunkers and taking cars off the road that aren't very efficient, or this 1603, both of them spent about $5 to $6 billion roughly. Turns out 1603 is far more efficient, probably by at least the same order as an acre of trees versus, now the answer, the acre of trees versus acre of solar panels, you got to do both, right?
Okay.
We have to do both. But that again, if we're going to advise the government on how to best use and be efficient with taxpayers' dollars, it's great to know what the impact is going to be and someone to do that calculation. I think I'm probably the only nerd that bothered to do it. But it was fun.
I can imagine you talking to non-engineers about cash for clunkers are tax breaks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right? That was the point. So I think that with regard to public service, that's another role that engineers have to play. And that's the beauty, in my view, of being at a land-grant university. You know, I just had an opportunity to meet with the governor yesterday for about an hour one-on-one. And, you know, my question was, what can we do to continue to provide benefit to the state of Ohio? You know, so we already, for every dollar that the state invests, we return about $23. You know, so that's a benefit. We don't talk about it enough, right? Policy, we can. This last year, you really saw the value of a land-grant university with all the testing we did, with all the vaccinations that we did. And I think that if I remember these numbers right, I think the Wexner Medical Center at the Ohio State University vaccinated 1 out of every 23 people in the state. So again, the service of testing, of being there by the side of the governor, talking about the pandemic. And I think that's the last thing, is engineers figure out a way to deal with ambiguity. And you may think that, well, isn't that like, you know, counterintuitive for an engineer? Because how many of us took classes where we had to put the answer in the box, right? Well, we got to think outside the box, right?
Right.
So that's what we teach engineers now, think outside the box.
So thinking outside the box, I'm going to go to my next question, which is entrepreneurship, which you mentioned.
Right.
So what role do you think engineers have, whether it's students, alums, faculty, in respect to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think all of the above, right? Because I think that so my definition of an entrepreneur is knowing the right thing to do without being told. So that's students, faculty, staff, that's everyone at the university, that's the president, it's the dean, you know, it's our alumni. We all need to know the right thing to do without being told, because the problems are so complex and they need urgent attention that we got to get at it. So I think that what I believe, which is helpful, is that we are focusing a couple programs in entrepreneurship, the Buckeye Entrepreneurship Program, where we will take great ideas from our undergraduate students and our graduate students, and this year we're going to have a competition, submit the ideas, and then we'll fund them to actually build a business plan around it and then see if they can actually learn how to start a company. Now, I also think, so that's one part, we're setting up a technology incubator just over here on High Street. It's going to have a great Starbucks in the ground floor, a large Starbucks, like 2,200 square feet. So people can sit around and drink good coffee and think up great ideas and work together in teams. So I think it brings people together. And I think there's intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. So we need intrapreneurs that will be entrepreneurial within the society and within our culture, within our university, I should say. And then entrepreneurs that go out and then benefit the greater society. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
So if you think about entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, and of course Starbucks kind of brings them together,
Right.
What are your thoughts then about kind of flipping it, being an entrepreneur, making you a better engineer? Any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, entrepreneurs are constantly having to figure out how to do more with less. And again, that comes back to Bill Wolf's engineering design under constraint. So I think that that's where engineering has a lot to offer entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are the why. So you've probably all read the stories. Actually, there's a beautiful article in Vanity Fair just in the last couple of weeks about Paul Allen and about the starting of Paul Allen, Bill Gates, and starting of Microsoft. And what they did in order to deliver that first operating system to New Mexico is they had to optimize code. It was only 2,200 lines of code in order to implement a full operating system. They had to be efficient. I've heard stories of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak when they were starting Apple. They would sit in the back of the room of the garage, the Computer Garage Club at Stanford, and that was held at Stanford. Obviously, a lot of other entrepreneurs were there, and they would design their circuits with as few transistors as possible. And that's that optimization, and it's the repetitiveness, right? We never get it right the first time or the second time, but by the third or the fourth time, you get it pretty optimized. So again, I think that's the interplay between entrepreneurs and engineers.
Because that skill set definitely helps in the classroom, that is for sure.
Right.
So my last question to you, and it's more of about engineering and thinking about kind of the future. When you think about what we can do as engineers, and again, we talked about the role, what are the things you think we need to lean into and change about how we do engineering? Is there anything?
Well, yes. I think that one of the things we touched on at the beginning is how do we attract a more diverse set of students to come into engineering? So women, underrepresented minorities. I mean, this is what's, to me, I'm such an engineering chauvinist that I want everybody to have an opportunity and a shot. And that's where I think, again, the Ohio State University can be the leader. And it'll take us time. You know, that's why in my first university address, I laid out a 10-year vision. I said, we're not going to do all these things overnight, but we're going to start the journey, and we're going to start the journey now, rather than waiting 2-3 years and then start the journey, and then you're behind the 8 ball, right? Let's start it now. All of us started that journey decades ago, and we've made an impact. Yeah. We have. I think we need to change the trajectory, which we can by coming together.
Beautiful. So that is my last personal question, and I'm going to throw the mic over to you.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Certainly exciting times for Ohio State with the two of you here. I think women should be very excited to see you in leadership here, because they can see that while they can be an engineer, now they belong in engineering and leadership too. And I think that's a really important message for women out there everywhere, that engineering is wide open, and you definitely belong, as you two have indicated. So we're going to turn to questions that were submitted by our viewers. We received nearly 100 questions in just that first week after opening registration for this event. We received some great questions from alums, from students and parents, with a couple of themes that sort of ran through them. And because we have limited time, I'm not going to ask you all 89 or so questions. We've selected just a few questions, and I think they pretty much represent the themes that were most common in the questions that were asked. So let's get started. The first question I will throw to you, Dean Howard, and then President Johnson, please feel free to contribute as well. It's near and dear to my heart as an alumna and a mentor, and that is, how can alumni get more involved with helping more women become successful in engineering?
So that's actually a fairly straightforward question, which is reach back and talk to the students and talk to the generation behind. So a lot of times, even today, we have students and young professionals that are still fairly isolated. They may be the only one in their team or in their class. And so when you come back and say, look, it's actually better on the other side, right? It does get better, and you make a lot more money too. It just kind of inspires. And so I think it's an easy thing, low-hanging fruit, but we do need a lot more of that. Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean, I'll tell you a little story. When I was dean of an engineering school, I was at the Pratt School of Engineering at Duke, and graduation comes. My favorite time of year. You know, it's great. All the labor of 4 years and what you really put in, and you see the students graduating. And a female student who was graduating left me a card, and it was describing an interaction we'd had 2 years earlier. Now, I have to admit, I didn't remember. And she goes, "You won't remember, but you were walking into the engineering building, and you saw me, and you said hello. And at that moment, I figured, if you could do it, I can do it." And that's all it took. So to your point, I mean, it takes more, of course. I mean, it took a lot of her hard work and her, really, but sometimes it can be as simple as a word of encouragement at the right time, or a lot of words reaching in and explaining. And I don't think we do this enough, is what your path going through these courses and curriculum, this very well thought out pathway, is going to get you, as you said, on the other side. And I think that's right. I loved your answer.
Great. Well, I certainly heard a call for all alumni to roll up their sleeves and participate. I hope you will all do that. Our next question comes from a mom of 2 young girls, 5 and 7 years old, who asked, how would you suggest she introduce girls to the world of engineering? Why don't you start, President Johnson?
I think early and often.
Amen.
I think that some of the things, actually, Ayanna, that you've worked on and that you do, and also, Lisa, what you've worked on with the robotics first. I mean, this is a way to introduce young kids early into doing projects. My dad gave me a telegraph set when I was about 7. And then we set it up and we talked to each other, tapped out from room to room. So you can do it at a very early age. Simple things.
Yeah, so my dad bought a soldering set for me in the 3rd grade. So same kind of thing. It's like, and I think it's exposure. It's about, bringing things in and just putting it in front of your young kids and your girls and just saying, hey, here it is, and working with them and encouraging them.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can bring the traditional female, dolls and houses, but also bring them the soldering kits and the electronic kits and the robotic kits and let them choose.
Yeah. I mean, we had erector sets when I was growing up, but I feel like, it's such a Luddite here because, of course, now all these young kids, the 5 and 7-year-olds, they're more savvy with the, electronic tools and, iPads and iPhones and everything, if they have access, which is another thing we want to work on, than, probably yours truly, but yeah, it's exposure.
Well, I couldn't agree more. My dad made me learn how to tune up my car before I was allowed to get my driver's license. So,
wow. Now that is really cool.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help me too much today. Cars
Right.
have changed so much, but yeah,
That's
it was good for me. That's all I'll say.
Wow.
And yeah, I think the numbers of women in engineering schools and in industry have been gradually creeping up over the past few years. Our next questioner said that she really didn't think things had changed significantly since she's graduated, though, and wanted to know, what can we do to increase the number of and the retention of women and underrepresented minorities in STEM careers? President Johnson?
So I can understand why the numbers may not have changed significantly, right? However, things have changed in the following way. So another little story. So when I was at Stanford, and this is what we're doing about this, I had wonderful professors, really fantastic professors, but no women in any of my technical subjects. And in over 8 years, I only had 2 women altogether, one in psychology, one in communications. So it never occurred to me that I could be a professor. I mean, women, that's not a career that they do. Until I started to get recruited to become a professor, and I thought, okay. Fast forward again till I was dean, and I'm advising students, and one of my advisees comes in, Mike, I remember his name, and he sits down, and I look at his schedule. All his professors, and they're all technical subjects, were women. I said, so Mike, anything different, you notice? No? How are your classes? Oh, they're great. And your professors? Oh, fabulous. I said, okay, I just have to tell you, I never had a woman that was a technical, as a professor who was technical. You have all women. He goes, yeah. That's change. And so taking that to the next level, we have a couple initiatives that we launched in the State of the University Address. One is the RAISE initiative, which is about doing research in race and inequities, and also about hiring underrepresented groups into professions. And when I say underrepresented groups, I am thinking broadly. So I'm thinking men in nursing and education, and we're thinking women in the STEM fields and underrepresented minorities in all fields. And that's, I really am a strong believer, you need to see, it helps, you don't need, but it helps to see it to be it. As Marion Edelman said.
Yeah, so I agree, the numbers are better. So that's hopeful. So
Yeah.
the trajectory is positive.
Right.
And I think a lot of the times, though, what we're seeing is you're doing a comparison. So if you're a woman, underrepresented minority, and you want to go into engineering, you then look at your friends who are not engineers and like, wait, like your classes look different than mine, right? And you're doing a comparison.
Sure,
and engineering, it can be hard sometimes, and then you're like, oh, maybe I don't need to be here.
Right.
And I think, at least here at the College of Engineering at Ohio State, we're going to change that perception because we have to. A lot of times, some of the students come in and don't realize they want to be engineers until they get here, and and we do not have the structure yet to ensure that they can enroll and be successful because they didn't take the right classes in high school, which meant they didn't take the right classes in middle school, which means that they didn't have that erector set in the 3rd grade, right? Which I think is unfair. And so it's about access, it's about exposure, but it's also about fixing it here, and I know we can do that.
Yeah, well, I know under your leadership, Dr. Howard, we are going to do that.
We are.
Wonderful, because these efforts are really going to be important because we do need more women and minorities in the engineering field. The world's problems have become so complex, and they require such innovative approaches that require that diversity.
Yeah.
Which sort of leads into the next question. The world of discovery and innovation has become largely, if not wholly, interdisciplinary. Mm-hmm. So Dean Howard, what are your goals with respect to cross-collaboration with other colleges at Ohio State? And President Johnson, how are you going to hold her accountable for doing that?
Well, one of the things is we have to rethink how we're training engineers outside of our box. So I do look at our curriculum in engineering, and the fact that some of it's the same curriculum as when I graduated, so many years ago, it's actually a shame because the world has changed and things have evolved. Why is it that we don't teach, artificial intelligence and computer science from freshmen? Like when you're doing circuit design, we should be using tools and teaching them tools to do this because that's how society and the world and companies are doing.
Right.
And so we really do have to rethink, and we are going to do that. Things about social justice, that should be part of the curriculum from day zero about responsibility. Of course, we have to rethink and redesign and integrate these things into our core curriculum.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, just hearing what you said rings very true. Integrating the richness of society into engineering and showing how engineering influences society, how society influences engineering. I just think it makes all the curriculum much more interesting. So, and I think history in particular and art, well, in all the humanities, but I like about history and engineering is you want to solve a problem, what do you first do? You go find out somebody else has had this problem before, right? So when we were trying to think about how we were going to attack, carbon in the atmosphere, we went back and studied, well, how did London solve the fog issue? Because fog was really coal. I mean, it was smog, it wasn't fog per se. And then you can learn about, okay, what do people do? And, I think it was great. Now, I hear somebody must be agreeing with me because thunder just happened outside.
Absolutely. All right then, one last question for you two. We know that it is important for leaders to model self-care and career wellness, but with all that you two have on your plates, how do you actually balance your vast responsibilities with personal well-being? And what do you recommend in this regard for current leaders and future ones?
You're starting with me?
Sure.
Darn, I want to be here. Ayanna was going to say.
Let's do that.
Well, health is really very important, and I always feel better, and everybody around me feels better when I get a chance to work out. So I think I'm going to be much more intentional about that my second year. It was a little more hit and miss in my first year. I actually enjoyed playing golf. I have this fun idea of getting women out onto the golf course, women leaders, if they play golf, for us to do that, if they don't, to learn. And so I think that would be a fun thing to do. I enjoy playing golf with many of my, I've had the opportunity over time, again, when I was dean, with donors and with alumni, and that was always a fun time, just a great way to spend time with people. So I'm looking forward to a couple of those things.
And you?
So after I'm completed my first year, I will get back to a life balance. But I think the things that are important and really important is exercise, definitely. Yeah. So I still exercise, through dance and hiking, and also eating. So I think a lot of times we're so busy, like we forget meals or we just grab whatever's on the plate or at the next dinner.
Yeah.
And so thinking about how do you eat better? Because whatever goes in, if it's not good, it really will ruin your mental state, your sleep state, and things like that. Yeah. So those are the two things that I try to balance as much as possible.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have to dust off our clubs, though.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to dust off our clubs. I also think it's great, a sense of family. And, look, we're both new to the area, and so we're making friends, and it does feel like a big family, which is very, very comfortable. So I think that's something that also that we draw strength from.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes our questions. Thank you both so much for sharing your personal stories, your insights, your visions for the university. For our audience, this has been a really great opportunity to learn from these two amazing trailblazing women and to gain from their perspectives. If you would like to learn more about Dean Howard and her vision and priorities for the College of Engineering, you can join her for her first virtual roadshow series on July 21st and 22nd, coming right up. For more information or to register for roadshow live webinars, visit engineering.osu.edu/events. And before I close, I'd like to thank Shannon Niemeyer and the University Libraries for hosting us today in the Mortar Boardroom, and Brent Davis and the team from WOSU for producing this recording. And finally, to our viewers, on this International Women in Engineering Day, I hope you will join us in continuing to celebrate in women engineers both today and every day. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Very nice.